Kufar, Akbar, everybody, welcome to another edition of the Crescent discussion group. This is a blog talk radio. Yes, it's a blog talk radio program dedicated to rightly dividing the truth between Christianity and Islam. We are here every Sunday at 4 p.m. Central Standard Time. We're usually here for about 2 hours. Last week, I think we went a little past 2 hours. So now that we're coming back, we're getting into the groove and things are progressing, and they take a little bit longer to get things done. And discussions are always better, too, I think. So welcome. Of course, Dr. Kufar Phobia is up there wreaking havoc on people. I don't even know who is that supposed to be. That's not you, I know, but it looks.
You didn't know I was Chinese?
It looks amazing. You look amazing. You could fit that. Probably now, you wouldn't be inflating balloons on our west coast, would you? Anything like that?
I plead the fifth.
Yeah. You don't get the Fifth Amendment yet, Tommy. They don't have that in China. Okay, well, welcome everybody. We appreciate everybody coming back today. And I look over here in the comments. Looks like Chloe's here, Emmanuel's here, and cross-examining scripture that he never returns as a horse. I still can't remember what that is. Is that like a phrase somebody uses? That am I right on that? This
I believe it comes from a movie. Yeah.
Okay. Well, he's got a donkey on there, so it's not a horse. I can't remember how that goes. I think
Larry.
CP.
No, cross-examining is Larry.
Yeah. Let me make sure I put that down, because Larry is always good fun over. If you guys don't get over on Clubhouse, that means that you have a life. However, if you don't have a life, you could go over to Clubhouse, and it's really good entertainment. Christian Prince, yeah, thank you. I figured that's what it was. It's really informative, and there's some great discussions to be had over there. But I would just say prepare your heart for people generally shouting at each other. There's a lot of times the conversations get carried away, and people just end up talking over each other and stepping on each other, and it can be annoying sometimes. But other times it really is pretty entertaining. Okay, so
Eric, there is I did me. Darcy.
Yeah, go ahead, Darcy. Sure.
No, there is something on Clubhouse that's been going on. It's a Muslim with a lot of us just talking with him, and he's very open. There's no shouting, no nothing, no name calling. So his name
that's
is
the kind of conversation you want to have. Go ahead. His name is what?
John. I'll have to look it up later.
Okay.
But I'll have to ping
I've heard some sincere conversations on there. I'm saying that all the conversations are a bunch of shouting matches and
Right.
people denigrating each other, things of that nature. But a
Yeah.
lot of times that's what
Next time I see you.
unfortunately. Okay, so today, admin note. Thank you all for your prayers for the Queen. Her surgery went well on Tuesday. The mass that they did take out was benign. There were no cancerous or precancerous cells in it, so we were excited to get that news. And it's just kind of a. Go ahead.
I said, praise Jesus for that.
Praise God for that. Yeah, that's kind of been it's just kind of one of those loads that you carry on your back. So yeah, praise God for that. Okay, so today we're going to pick up where we left off last week. Do y'all remember what we talked about last week? We were talking about Ptolemy. You remember that conversation? We were talking about Ptolemy and how that's often used as a refutation for the history behind, or the absent history behind, a 7th century Mecca. Oops, wrong one. I'm going to make sure let's see here. How do I do this? Present. Huh. There we go. Can you guys see that? There we go.
Yes.
All right. So last week, we did the whole show was dedicated towards talking about Mecca and this reference to Ptolemy in Mecca. And when we went through this, we looked at the physical evidence, the manuscript evidence for it, the archaeological evidence for it, the geographical, cartographical evidence, and there's nothing there that you can look at and say, okay, there was a 7th century Mecca that existed. And when we look at the location of Mecca itself, when we look and compare that to Christianity, where everything lines up and you have cross references throughout the Bible and archaeological proofs to demonstrate the veracity of what was being discussed there, you don't have that with Mecca. You don't have anything. There's no historical record there. And when people start bringing up Ptolemy, we went through this shtick for Ptolemy, and I showed you where Ptolemy's actual coordinates, because he's the one that came out with the meridian type mapping, where it's a 3-dimensional, you put longitudinal and latitudinal lines and something. It places Mecca, this Makaroba, it doesn't even name it the right city. It places it east of Mecca, or east of Medina, when Mecca sets west and south of Medina. So it wasn't in the right place. Second thing, and this is the most important thing, when I say all, I mean every single one of the previous cartographers and geographers that had gone through and explored that region never mention it. None of them, to include Strabo, who was the head geographer for Roman Gallus, who came down to conquer Yemen, and they were desperate to find cities that would trade with them so they could feed their army and water their army. And nobody mentions Mecca. You would think out of all of those, Strabo would have found it, that he doesn't mention it either. And all of the other people like Diodorus, that they, not Diodorus, I can't remember the guy's name. I think it was Diodorus, that talks about there's a shrine, a holy shrine. Well, he's talking about the Nabateans way in the north of Arabia. So all of those things was decimated last week. We clearly refuted that Ptolemy shtick that I keep getting emails from people saying, well, Ptolemy mentions Mecca. Shut up. He doesn't mention Mecca by name. He mentions Makaraba ain't even in the right place. So please save it. And it's only mentioned one time, only in one passage. Nobody else mentions Makaraba, and it's only mentioned one time in this place, in one place. So there you go. Somebody was going to say something.
Dominic said he was trying to join.
Who?
Dominic. You want to look for Dominic?
I don't see Dominic. Dominic trying to join. Well, I tell you what, I'm going to do something risque. I am going to put the StreamYard link in chat. So if you want to come up, Dominic, there you go.
Truly funny, the phonetic fallacies these people try to pass off, man.
Yeah, right. Yeah, with this Song of Solomon stuff, the phonetic. Yeah,
Yep.
the phonetic fallacy shtick. We've seen that. It's what did it say? What is it? 519? And it doesn't matter. We're not doing the show on that. Okay.
516.
516. Okay. I was in the wrong. Okay. They are in Arabic. I found out that the manuscripts of Ptolemy are late. That's Dominic saying that the manuscripts are late and they are in Arabic, and everybody's shocked. Everybody's shocked about that. Yeah, I kept looking for them and I couldn't find exactly what it said. I just kept finding people who referenced what Ptolemy said. So if you're going to have that many people reference what the guy said or what the guy wrote, I'm going to go with the, what the scholars say about it. But the conclusions that were drawn were completely wrong, and I think we completely blew that out of the water last week. Okay, so unlike last week, where we were arguing from the position of silence, what we're going to do this week is we're going to argue from the position of physical evidence, things that we have in our hand, that we can touch, that we can test, that we can use the scientific methodology of, there's Dominic, the scientific methodology of testing it, repeating the experiment, and seeing if it, sorry.
Bless you.
I gotta do something about these allergies.
No, because I found out the Ptolemy manuscripts are really late.
How late are we talking?
So the
5th century?
I think it's like really quite late. I need to look it up, but so some of them were written in Arabic, and it was more like 14th century. So the thing is, there's some scholars that say they may have actually been changed. So the actual manuscripts actually may have been changed kind of later on to actually put Mecca actually on there.
Say that last part again. Say the last part again.
That's funny.
Say the last part again.
That's funny.
Say that last part again.
So there's some evidence that they may have been changed. So the scholars, yeah.
Okay, so what you're saying is that this reference that they're saying that Ptolemy made to Makaraba comes from a 14th century copy, Arabic copy, or translated copy of what he had written in the 2nd century. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. So because the manuscripts are so late that there's no actual kind of evidence to say, okay, this is what because when I was looking up, it was quite interesting to see. But because it doesn't make any sense, because you've got all the other kind of early sources kind of stating the Mecca's not on the thing. But the thing is, when you look at it into further detail into actual manuscripts, you kind of find, okay, because all the ducks line up for the other stuff, but why on earth have you got this one kind of black sheep on the thing? So that was what made me look into the manuscript evidence, just to see, okay, has this been changed, or has this been edited, or just is there? So yeah, which well,
there's see that, but that's the point is that there's no other evidence. There is no other mention of it, and even Ptolemy does not name Mecca by name. The name, and if you talk to linguists, the name is not even close. The etymology of the name is not even close to Mecca. So to claim that is Mecca is and what I pointed out last week is it's just desperation.
Mm.
They need it to be Mecca. But that's interesting that they derived that from a 14th century translation, Arabic translation. And it's kind of funny how it made its way into the Encyclopedia Britannica and all of these other mainstream scholars. And there's several scholars that will continue to cite this Makaraba as a reference to Mecca. But it's kind of the garbage in, garbage out principle. If you don't have anybody, field testing this or going through the peer review process of verifying it, that's very problematic, especially when we consider how we arrive at his historical facts. If you're relying on a translation of a document that doesn't even mention your city, written and probably well, I don't know, like you said, it might have been tampered with, manipulated. Let's just be polite about it. Manipulated by somebody that have extreme biases towards it. Yeah, I can see where
because
we would have some
the
problems.
writing comes from his book on is it geography, because he wrote some other kind of manuscripts, and when I saw the manuscripts were extremely late, I was thinking, okay, there's something wrong with this. If the manuscripts are like extremely late,
Can you email me that information? Can you do that for me?
It was no. I was using ChatGPT, so I was using ChatGPT to kind of actually find the information. So I
don't know what that is. What are you using? Chat what?
So ChatGPT is it's an AI kind of search engine that you kind of use that I've been using to find, say, chat.
Okay, well, whatever you got,
One
can
of
you
those
just send it to me, because what I'm going to be going on, I'm going to be going on Bob the Builder's show here in a couple weeks, and I'm going to be using that. I'm going to be presenting that information that I did last week on his show, and I want to make sure that I have
correct information,
as much information as I possibly can for it. Okay, so for today we're going to move over to evidences for our faith. Now, when we look at evidences for our faith, I mean, we're talking about real evidences. We're not just talking about allusions to some fanciful city that has no archaeological support for it. We're talking about things that we can actually touch. We can go back and we can touch the Dead Sea Scrolls, the manuscript evidence that we have for the Old Testament dating back to 2,300 years ago. You have extra biblical sources supporting the biblical account of the crucifixion of Christ. You have geographical evidences, places, people, names, etc., that include naming King David, to naming Israel, to naming all kinds of other people within the Old Testament, to include Sennacherib and his castle, Jonah and a monument or a mosque built to his glory there in what is now Nineveh or Mosul, Iraq. You have all kinds of scientific evidences for special creation. Archaeological and historical evidence today, they're still digging stuff up underneath the Temple Mount, clearly demonstrating an occupation of Israel by the Jews for dating back to the 1000 BC. And then the evidence for the resurrection. We have evidence, extra biblical evidence for the crucifixion. And when we start talking about the physical evidence for the crucifixion or manuscript evidence for the crucifixion, we're talking about people that will refer to Christ being crucified on the cross under Pontius Pilate, Tacitus, the normal, Pliny the Younger, Flavius Josephus, Suetonius, all these guys. Well, Suetonius didn't. I don't really retract Suetonius. He doesn't mention it. But there's all other people who did history or who did. Who was the Greek satirist? I can't remember who, but they wrote about this guy. They hated Christians, and they wrote about them in derogatory means. Well, you can use that to corroborate the crucifixion of Christ, saying that, okay, this idea that the New Testament presents that Jesus was indeed crucified on a cross is almost, well, it isn't almost, it is impeachable. You cannot say and still have any sort of historical legitimacy that Jesus was not crucified on the cross. You cannot do that. All the evidence points in the direction that he was crucified. If you're going to say, well, the Quran says, and this is why we brought it up, because this is one of the main refutations of the Quran, is that Surah 4:157 clearly states that Jesus was not crucified. He was not killed. It only appeared to them. Well, that comes right out of the Nag Hammadi literature from, I think that's 3rd century AD stuff, from the second great treatise of Seth. So we know where that story originated from. But what about the resurrection? We have the testimony of the apostles saying post crucifixion appearances of Christ, and you have 1 Corinthians 15 verses 3 through 8, which is a very early Christian creed within 6 months to a year of the cross that was developed. Most scholarship today says that we can use that, and that says, okay, the apostles saw them, and then over 500 people saw a resurrected Christ.
And you also have church fathers who knew some of the apostles that attest to it as well.
Yeah, and this is how we have we don't have a chain of transmission. We have a chain, not a chain of narration, but we have a chain of written transmission from bringing that up, from the early church fathers, all mentioning this. But what if there was physical evidence for this? And this is what we were talking about before the show. And one of the things that was brought up is that if this is or is not real, my faith is not contingent upon this. And I would agree. Our faith is not contingent upon what we're going to discuss today. But this is, in my opinion, one of those God things. Something that God would do to say, oh, you're not going to believe the testimony of the eyewitnesses to the event, the plethora of extra biblical evidence to the events. Okay, fine. Well, how about this? So one of the things that I do, and I know a lot of you know, okay, Kaffir, you have no life. And this is probably true, but I do a lot of reading. This is a God thing. The Shroud of Turin. The Shroud of Turin, I personally, and I'm bragging, yes, that's right. You all can just sit there and just kind of say, okay, you have an arrogant attitude right now. And I do, because I've personally been able to see the Shroud of Turin in person. It was when I was stationed in Italy for the 2000 millennia celebration. You guys all remember that hype around that Y2K. We're all going to end. The world's going to end. So the church rolls out the Shroud of Turin, and me and my family were able to go up there and see it firsthand. You can't take pictures of it because when you get into this room, it was like, oh, and plus you didn't have phones at that time where you took pictures. You actually had to have a camera, digital cameras with the 3.5-inch fly. It was a hot mess. But anyway, I was able to see this thing firsthand, and it's the most amazing. It is probably the most amazing thing that I've ever seen in my life, is to see an image, a 3D image on a piece of cloth that is 2,000 years old. To see an image just like this that bears all of, when I say all of the things described in the gospel about the Passion of Christ, it's absolutely amazing. So what I want to do is I want to go through why I believe that this is the actual burial cloth of Christ. When we start looking at, okay, well, what would you have to have in order to demonstrate the veracity of this? And I know the first place people want to go, well, the carbon dating in 1988 said that it was, it's a medieval forgery. It was back to 1260 to 390, or no, 1260 to 1390 is the time frame that gave. And I'm going to address that, and I'm going to show you how that date has been refuted. It was refuted in 2002 by, oh, by the way, somebody that was on the same team that dated it in 1988. Okay, so let's take a look at what the shroud is. When we look in the Bible describes this shroud. It says Joseph of Arimathea went to Pilate and asked for the body of Jesus. Then he took it down and wrapped it in a linen. Notice that word there, linen. That's important. Hold on, where's my laser pointer? Is this it? No, that's not it. Did this change? It did change. There we go. That's my laser pointer. There we go. What is going on here?
You just turned on your speech to text.
Oh my gosh! Hold on. Okay, how do I get this off here? Okay, hold on. Let's do this. Okay, let's see here. What's this? Is that? No, no, I messed up. Okay, how about that? There. Okay.
It's in your slideshow. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. But I don't have, where's my laser? Life should not be this hard. There we go. All right, I got my laser pointer back. I feel all confident now. All right, sorry, folks. Okay, so when we look in the Gospel of Luke, it mentions this linen that Christ was laid in. The Gospel of Mark mentions the same thing. Then he bought fine linen. He took him down and wrapped him in the linen, and he laid him in a tomb which had been hewn out of the rock. The Gospel of John, chapter 20, talks about and looked at the strips of linen lying there, did not go in. He saw the strips of linen lying there, as well as the cloth that had been wrapped around Jesus' head. Now, this cloth right here, we have found also, or we have, we'll talk about that. And then in Luke, of course, it talks about Peter rose and ran to the tomb, stooping down. He saw the linen clothes by themselves, and he went home marveling at what had happened. And then, of course, 2759, Joseph took the body, wrapped it in clean linen cloth. So all four Gospels mention that Jesus was buried in clean linen cloth. So when you look at the type of cloth that he was buried in, it's this type right here. It's they have it three. I got it here, and as a matter of fact, I'm sitting on a piece that is woven using that pattern right now, and I want to talk about that. But anyway, if all four Gospels mention that Jesus was buried in linen, we would call that a clue. Now, the Shroud of Turin is the most studied artifact in the history of the world. And when we look at its study today specifically, and let me make an aside here. When we look at the study of it today, the intensity of the study was exponentially increased at the turn of the 20th century, or the 19th century. No, it was the 20th century, 1900s, when that Italian photographer went in and he took a negative picture of the shroud, and that image bounced out onto his photograph. And when that got disseminated around the world, that's when people started saying, hey, what the heck is this thing, where you would have a negative image taken from a photograph of a piece of cloth that bears the resemblance of a human being. So that's why it's become the most studied artifact in history. And when we look at the image itself, it's the equivalent of a negative photo projected upon the cloth itself. And the details that you can ascertain from it are extremely clear when looking at the photographs of it using that type of light. There are images of the front of Christ because he was laid on the linen, and then the linen was folded. Let me do this here so you understand what he did here. Okay, so he was laid on the linen. Let's say this is the feet and this is the head, and then the linen was folded up over on him. So you would have both sides, his back and his front images on the cloth itself. And as you can see, there's wounds in the wrist, there's wounds in the side. And when you get down by the feet, you can see the feet, and then you can see a lot of things going on here in the face. So there's all kinds of different things that we find on here. Here are the scourge marks that we find all over the body that they've highlighted here. Now, this picture right here comes from a museum. I believe this picture comes from the museum out in Colorado. If you ever get the chance to go to Colorado Springs, Colorado, or if you're out that way, there is a gentleman that runs a museum. It's at a Catholic church. His name's Jackson. And he'll give you a personalized briefing on the shroud itself if you make a reservation with him. The address for them is, I thought I had it. I do not have it up. I thought I had it. Okay, well, it's, if you do Shroud of Turin Colorado Springs, Colorado, you'll find the way to contact them to get that set up if you ever want to go out there. And this is he has a full size replica of the shroud. He has this right here where it shows the wound marks on the shroud. He has a 3D figure of what Christ would have looked like as he was buried with his legs bent up. It's absolutely amazing what this guy has there. Okay, so and then this is a image taken from the cloth. This is a 3D image that we're going to talk about here shortly. So this is the actual, what we actually see on the cloth, and this is the photograph. And if you look how detailed that photograph is, it's absolutely amazing. And if we think about when we can actually see what Christ looked like, I mean, this can really freak some of you guys out, I'm sure. You start over here. You start over here with just the picture, then you could add the effects, and then this is what you would come up with. And again, we were talking at the beginning of the show. We went into Isaiah 53. Let me see if I can bring that back up, where it kind of outlines what he would look like. It says, let's see here, for he grew up before him like a young plant, like a root out of dry ground. He had no form or majesty that we should look at him, and no beauty that we should desire him.
Let's say those painted pictures try to make him look pretty after looking at that. And that's the difference. That I think they try to beautify what's actually on the shroud.
Well, and if you look, what's actually on the shroud, this guy doesn't look like he just had the snot kicked out of him for the past 24 hours. It doesn't bear any of the wounds on his head or on his face, where they pulled parts of his beard out and how he had his eyes were all swelled up. It doesn't. You're right. It does not have that.
I think they also, they're using makeup and stuff. I think they type of art. They're thinking art, and so you have to look at this. That's why I don't think they're exact or close images. They're trying to render a pretty version of what they're seeing.
Right, but okay, but let's just say it's close, though. Do you think that could be close?
I still think they cleaned it up too much, because as much as it would be he would be disfigured. I still don't think they made him. I still think they cleaned it up too much to make him look more appealing.
And you're probably right. I would agree. I would agree with that. But I'm just saying, if it's even close, though, it's pretty amazing.
I don't think Jesus was white. Is the other thing. I think he was olive skinned.
I don't think that looks like a white guy. Does that look like a white guy?
It does look. No. They look like white guys to me.
Do they? Okay.
He was olive skinned. So
I think just kind of a tan.
Yeah. Well, if you look at people from that region today, they have the hair would most certainly be darker.
Yeah.
And I would agree that the skin would probably be darker also. But this is the resolution on my computer here. If you look at the actual picture, what happened to my laser pointer? How disappointing is this?
I end up using my. All right. Well.
What a miserable.
Because you wouldn't be able to tell the eye color.
See that?
Because the eyes the eyes, because you can't tell the eye color.
No, you can't. Well, you won't,
because the eyes.
Tell the eye. Go ahead, Dominic. I'm sorry.
Because if you're recreating it, because the eyes are covered in coins, so there's no way that you'd be able to cover the eye.
Yes.
Yeah, I was just going to make that point. Yeah, and that's actually part of the presentation here. So we would never know what the eye color was, whether it's a brown, a dark brown.
And you couldn't tell the exact.
That wasn't a Jewish tradition, though. That wasn't a Jewish tradition to cover their eyes with coins.
That was Roman.
Yeah.
Okay, Ed, you got a question in the YouTube chat. And have an image of what the MDs believe Christ would have looked like post beating?
We're
Yeah, actually I do, and it's It's really gruesome.
The closest thing I can think of is watch the that video, that Mel
Let me
Gibson
see.
video.
Passion
Oh my
of
God!
Christ. Yeah, I've heard that he's
Yeah,
making a
Passion of Christ,
sequel to that. Is that true? Do you guys know if that's true or not?
Hold on, I can show you.
Do you know if that's true? If he's making a sequel to that movie, I've heard all kinds of
Yes.
No,
Yes.
I haven't heard that.
I've heard that he is.
Yeah, it's not.
That's kind of scary.
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
look how much money that made for him. If he'd be kind of silly.
If he
not to
follows
even
through and
try.
does the Book of Acts, that'd be really cool.
But I don't think that's what was his focus. I think his focus. Well, I don't even know. I've seen a couple of interviews that he's given where he's mentioned that he's going to do a movie, and he's going to talk about the time period of the crucifixion to the resurrection. He's going to address that, and then the 40 days before ascension. I think. I don't know. Well, nobody knows. So we'll just have to wait to buy the DVD or you actually go to the theater. And I mean, when's the last time anybody went to a movie theater, for crying out loud?
Not too long ago, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I haven't been in years. Well, I take that back. I went to see one with Warner, the quarterback, played for the Rams. And the only reason why I went to see it is because he played in the college, University of Northern Iowa, before he played for the Rams. He played for the Rams, the St. Louis Rams, won the Super Bowl, went to the Cardinals, went to the Super Bowl. Kurt Warner. There we go. There we go. I knew it would come to me.
My city's in it. Philadelphia. Go Eagles.
Oh, that's today, isn't it? That's right. I forgot that. Yeah. What time does that start? We're going to be in competition with them.
I think it's around 6-ish.
It's 7:00. I think it starts.
Okay. I found it.
Okay. Found what?
I found what the American Medical Society said Jesus would have looked like after the crucifixion.
Okay, can you share it? Is it PG-13,
Yep.
R, or what?
It's R. Well, it's not R, but it's gruesome. Hold on, let me get the. Let's see here. Trying to find my. Oh, here we are.
Waiting on you. It's okay.
Yeah, I know. I'm just getting over to my StreamYard again because I had to close a few things to get to it. Here we go. Nope, that's not it. Dang it. This has got to be it. No, that's not it either. I'm on StreamYard, right?
Mm-hmm.
Still?
That's what we're on. Yeah, we're using the stream.
Yeah, okay. My goodness. How many browsers do I have open? Is this it? Oh. Sorry, guys. Close some of this stuff out so I can figure out where I am. You're
one of those guys that probably has 30, 40 windows open, tabs.
Yes. Yes, I do.
Okay, that's the sickness. When
yes.
you're that busy,
There we go. All right. I got it. I found y'all. Y'all were over on the other screen.
Okay.
No, because if you have loads of tabs open, you need loads of you need a lot more RAM on your computer.
I've got 64 gigs.
Because the more tabs you have open, the more RAM it uses up on your computer.
Here we go. There you go. There it is.
Ow. Holy moly. Whoa.
Ow.
Yep. That's what it would have looked like.
That's gruesome. Gruesome.
There's only so much.
Told you.
Okay. Yeah, that's we appreciate you sharing that, but yeah.
Sam wouldn't let me show it on his live stream. So
it explains why they wouldn't recognize him.
Yeah, that's true. Okay. All right. So let's take a look and see what the shroud actually is real quick. Go over here. Okay. So this is herringbone weave flax that is 14 feet and long, 3.5 inches wide. This type of stitching, okay, this is an important part here, folks. This type of stitching was not used in Europe. This was used in Israel at this time, and this has been demonstrated by discoveries at excavation digs at Masada. Now, this weave, it's a special kind of weave. I got this cloth here. This was given to me by, I don't know if you can really see how it's woven. If I pull it apart, you can see the weave. It's a very distinct weave pattern. It was given to me by my Sunday school class when my mom passed. They gave it to me because we talked about the shroud, and this is something that they knew that would bring me comfort. So every time I think about it, I get to think about my mom. But the weaving in itself is the same weaving that we find here. It's a distinct weaving. It's 3/1, I think they call it a 3/1 herringbone weave, and it's unique to that region. And it was used for fine linens, burial cloths at that time. Now, when we look at the image of the shroud, and this is another thing that we were discussing prior to the show. You guys should have been here prior to the show. We should have did the recording of the show earlier. Anyway, let's see here, jackets of the 60s. The image on the shroud only lies on the outer fibers of the outer threads. Now, let me make sure you understand what I'm talking about here. The markings that produce this image, that produce the light or the darker areas, are only on, like, for example, there's not going to be any marking right here, or there's not going to be any of the outer threads that are marked in this region. But when we get here, you can see where there are more of the threads are marked for a darker image. So when we look at the threads themselves, when I talk about this, we're talking about, when you have the entire thread going through there, we're just talking about the fibers, not the thread itself, and not even the outer threads. We're just talking about the fibers on the threads that are the outer part. So if you have this many threads on the linen itself, we only find these markings on the very outer edges of that. Where there's darker spots, more of the fibers are going to be darkened, but for the most part, it's just a very faint touching of them. So nobody knows of any type of process where you could darken just the outer threads of a piece of cloth to produce an image like that. There's no known processes that we could do. Today I think they've talked about putting some type of silver ions on a cloth and then shining light on it, and then that's fine, okay. But this was 2,000 years ago. So to say that this was, this is a what do they call that, a hoax or a medieval forgery, it's just simply not true. It's desperation to say that. When you look at the markings on the shroud itself, now you can see, and again, as Ed had pointed out, a doctor's rendition of what the body would have looked like. You can see the blood stains, severe swelling, and other facial injuries, and it provides this slide provides the chapter and verse for each book where we learned about these things. For example, over here we have the crown of thorns and the blood stains from them. You have elliptical wounds visible on the right side of the chest for where the spear went through. You have blurred injuries on the shoulders, which would covered on the back side of it anyways, would be caused by carrying the cross. It says that there's several contusions on the knees where It would have been suffered from continual falls. But the legs, folks, this is the important part. The legs are not broken. The legs are not broken. And that's important to understand, especially when we understand how the final death blow was rendered to people that were crucified. Their legs were broken, so they cannot push up. If you cannot push up, you cannot exhale.
Right.
You cannot exhale, you suffocate. So
Yeah, they were broken at the knees.
So yeah, exactly. So to say that the legs are still intact is very important in narrowing down who this individual was. The wrists and feet are punctured. Of course, that would be anybody that is crucified. And then you have, of course, extension wounds across the body from the whipping. Now, the thing that makes this unique to Christ is, number one, the blood stains on the head from the puncture wounds from the crown of thorns that was placed on him. The other thing is being stabbed through the chest into the heart. That is unique to Christ. So these three things, and the bones not being broken, the legs not being broken, indicate the uniqueness of this individual, setting him apart from the overwhelming majority of the rest, because the Romans literally crucified hundreds of thousands of people. So what would make this guy unique? Well, number one, most people who were crucified, their bodies were just dumped into the city garbage dump. They weren't afforded a proper burial. But number two, more importantly, this image provides a clear indication that this guy suffered the same type of wounds as our Lord and Savior did during his passion. When we look at the wounds here, you have 233 different marks, indicating that he had been whipped with a cat of nine tails. Of course, you have the wounds here on the hands, the feet, and the puncture wound. On the side of the chest, you have scourge marks, which are all over the body. And then, of course, you have markings on the head, the front, and the back, indicating that he had something pushed into his head. And again, the legs are not broken. And the question then becomes, okay, how many other crucifixions bear all of these markings that are completely consistent with what the New Testament teaches? And there are none. Well, I wouldn't say none, but we don't know any from recorded human history anyway. We don't have any of that. Let's see here. Yes, like, share, and subscribe. Thank you, Dragon, for coming and making that. Okay. So let's talk about the historical record for this. Now, when we start talking about demonstrating where'd I go? Okay, demonstrating the veracity of this. Is this the actual burial cloth of Christ? There's several different things that we have to look at. You have to look at, number one, Paul, the historicity of it. Is there a historic audit trail on this thing? Scientifically, does this appear? Can we demonstrate the antiquity of this cloth? And also culturally, has there ever been any mentions of this within cultures, or can we see changes within cultures? And this is the one that I need to do more work on. I have a book that deals with it down here that I just haven't gotten to, that deals with the culture and the art that surrounds the shroud itself. Okay, so let's bounce back over here and let's talk about how from the very first century, you have King Adgar, who lived up to 50 AD. He writes about a cloth bearing the image of Jesus. And in this, he states that he was given a towel, and when he washed himself, he wiped his face with it. His image was imprinted on the linen. So you have the image of Jesus being imprinted on a piece of cloth, being discussed by this guy in Edessa. Is that where he was? He was in Edessa. I'm fairly certain this is in Edessa, just north of Jerusalem, in the first century. So yes, this is early attestation to the cloth. You have ecclesiastical history. from Edessa that say that they have a cloth that has a image that is a divine origin that allowed them to. Then they use this as kind of like how they used to carry the Ark of the Covenant before them in battle. They used this to destroy a siege mound when they were being laid siege to. You have the Apostle Thaddeus calls the cloth a tetrapylon, and that means that it's folded over 4 times, and that's exactly what we see with the shroud itself. And this term only appears twice in historical texts, and that's pretty remarkable. Gosh, why does my laser pointer keep going off? And then when we look at the shroud itself, we can see that the fold marks there on the shroud, that it is folded over 4 times. And then if you historically, you go look in 943 in the Byzantine Emperor Romulus sends an army of 80,000 people to besiege the Muslim city of Edessa to take the image of Edessa. And what was that image of Edessa? Well, a lot of people believe that was indeed the Shroud of Turin, and this is a 10th century document. And they say that they surrendered it, and it was shipped back to Constantinople. When the shroud arrives in Constantinople. Now, keep in mind, all of these dates predate the 1988 carbon-14 test dates. Test dates of 1260 to 1390. All of these dates that I'm mentioning right here predate that. Here you have a narration describing a private viewing of Constantine VII, where his 2 brothers-in-law and Emperor Romulus confirmed, and this is confirmed in another writing by a monk, that these people were looking at a cloth bearing the image of Christ. 958, same Constantine VII, in a letter, he says that sacred linens, the sindon, which is the shroud, which God wore, and other symbols of immaculate pageant. What they're doing is I think this is where they were doing an inventory of their relics that they possessed at that time. I'm willing to be wrong on that, but I think this is where they were discussing them. Again, here we have, or no, this is the relic collection here. Okay, the other one, this was a letter. I'm sorry, I should have read what I wrote there. Here's where they did an inventory on the relics that they have. 1201. Notice that this predates even the lowest or the earliest limit, excuse me, of that carbon-14 dating of the Shrupp team in 1988. This is 1201, and it talks about the burial cloth of Christ in 1201. 1204, you have a Frenchie, Robert Clary. He wrote about the shroud in which our Lord had been wrapped, and he says that it was displayed every Friday until 1204, which dates 50 years prior to even the earliest date from the 1988, what they call the Shroud of Turin team. They call it stirrup, something like that. And then you get a Budapest library in Hungary, just having a picture drawn in, what does this say? It was like a prayer manual, if I'm not mistaken. Let's see, an illustration. Yeah, prayer manuscript. Here it is. It's right here. It's prayer manuscript. Shows the preparations for Christ's burial. Now, the cloth depicts the same type of weave. Notice it's the same type of weave as the shroud, plus 4 holes. Let's see. Here's one, and I can't see the other one, but it has 4 holes that were in that we know that are in the shroud. These were burn holes that the shroud had suffered in a previous fire. I think the shroud's been burned like 3 or 4 times. It's caught things. Bad luck, I guess. But anyway, this in this prayer manual, almost 100 years prior to the earliest dates of that C14, depicts the Shroud of Christ. Is this Connie? Is that you, Connie? Hello.
Yeah, whenever I go to put a scripture on the comments, It eventually kicks me out. I can't stand the StreamYard.
Sorry. Let's see, John. Let's see. What do you got here? Then he said, Thomas, put your fingers, look at my hands. Yeah, this is post-resurrection sightings. Okay. What else we got here? Okay, so let's talk about the Shroud of Turin team that went to date the Shroud. Now, this was a team that went in 1988, and they studied it for, I don't know, 3 straight days. And they cut off a couple samples of the Shroud itself. The Catholic Church, the Vatican allowed them to do that. And they sent it out to 3 separate laboratories, I believe it was. And they came up with, sorry, a range of dates that begin in 1260 AD and an outer date of 1390 AD. Now, these samples were taken from the corners of the Shroud. This is the important thing to understand about this, and this is why this science has been debunked, because this is the most handled place on the Shroud where you would have contamination, and you would also have wear. Because if you're going to hold up a cloth, are you going to hold it up by the center and say, "Hey, look"? No, you're not going to hold it up, because you're not going to be able to see it flattened out. So in order to get it flattened out, you have to hold it by all 4 corners. And by holding it by all 4 corners, those corners are the ones that are going to be worn. So what happens over time is those corners wear out and they start to fray. This is the important part. Let me get back over here. Hold on. Okay, so in 2002, one of the guys that was on the team itself. Well, first off, let me back up to this guy here that wrote this book here. His name's Joe Marino. Joe Marino was on the show the last time we did this. We did this topic a couple years ago, and he is the one. Him and his wife were the ones that actually went in and looked at the threads of the Shroud under a microscope, and they realized that the new threads to repair those corners had been woven into the Shroud and also had been dyed. Now, the guy that they sent that information to a guy by the name of Ray Rogers, Dr. Ray Rogers, who was a member of that team in 1988. And there's a YouTube video of, they interviewed Ray Rogers about this. And evidently for years, people had been coming up with all kinds of excuses. It cannot be, they come up with all kinds of what's the word I'm looking for? Come on. They think that it was put up. I tell you what, I can't remember words anymore. I am getting terrible. Conspiracy. There we go. Paul, are you talking? You're muted.
They were claiming there were frescoes. They were claiming there were all sorts of art, fake forgeries in there.
Right.
There was frescoes. It was a combination of fresco type painting and something else. And I've read so many theories on it.
Well, when Ray Rogers was tired, go ahead.
There's nothing I've seen that hasn't been debunked.
Yeah, what Ray Rogers was tired of was all these he called them crazies, coming up with conspiracy theories that the Vatican, purposely went in there and changed the threads out so it would, they could protect their, and he said he just got sick and tired of listening to these guys. But if you listen to the interview that they did with him, and where Joe Marino went up and talked to him and said, "Look, this is what my wife and I have found. Can you at least take a look at it?" And he did. He got the microscope out, went and did the work. And sure enough, the repairs, and this is the important part, the repairs that they did were woven directly into the cloth itself. It was almost a seamless repair. Now, I don't know how people can do that type of stuff, but I guess if you don't have any life like me, you can sit there and take your time and weave all of these threads into the Shroud itself to repair it. Here's the problem. If those threads that they use to repair it are woven into the Shroud, those threads, when they repaired it, are what are going to be dated, not the actual shroud itself. It's the threads themselves, or maybe a combination of both of them are what's going to be dated. Now, if you know anything about carbon-14 dating, what you do is you look at the amount of radiocarbon parent atoms are there, are elements, and daughter elements. And carbon-14 has a predictable decay rate. So you would have, after a certain amount of time, a ratio of parent and daughter elements. Well, if those parent, the younger the item is, the higher the number of parent elements that you are going to have, and the lesser the ratio of the daughter elements, of the decay rate. So you would have a much younger artifact or dated artifact. Whereas if you just use the actual shroud itself, it moves it up to a 2013 dating of it, put it at right at the beginning of the 1st century, where they went in and they dated the center of the artifact itself. And we're going to get to that. But this idea that the artifact, that the shroud has been dated to and making it a medieval forgery has been debunked, and it's been debunked by a guy that actually sat on the team himself. And when you do this, like I said, it will throw off the dating of that if you use recent threads, because the recent threads, of course, are going to have more recent carbon, higher ratios of it. Now, there was a 1982 dating of this, and it dated the shroud to 30 to 70 AD. And like I said, the 230 or 2013 carbon-14 datings, 3000 or 300 BC to, oh my goodness, hold on, I don't have, doggone you, to 400 AD, 300 BC to 400 AD. I'm sorry, I didn't have that other thing got cut off.
That's a huge time span. I don't think they were trying to narrow it at all.
It is 700 years. I agree with that. But the older an item is, the greater the time span is going to be between the dates that you provide. And when you, especially, and the thing is that, with using AMS, accelerated mass spectrometry, you would think that it would be easier to date something like that. But I'm not exactly sure. And when they do this, what's really crazy, I've seen the process before, and people go through the process of taking a sample and they just completely destroy it. They burn it, they take the fibers and they put it in some type of liquid. The methodology behind this is just absolutely nuts. But with these other ones, they have dated it back to within at least the time period in which it's supposed to sit. But even with that, I'm not even going to go, because with the carbon-14, you're talking about a artifact that's been involved in I don't know how many different fires. And when you start getting other carbon and other contaminants in there, that's going to throw that out. There's other ways to date an article or an item, and that's what I want to talk about here. There's other ways that they dated this thing. Whoops. What happened? What happened to my rookie? Here we go. Get back up there. There we go. Okay. All right. There's the lignin test. A lignin test looks at the daughter and parent elements of what they call banalin. And when you look at the shroud itself, it did not have, the banalin is the daughter element of flax. And when we mean by the daughter element of flax, that means that this is what flax decays into. And if the shroud itself would be a medieval forgery dating back to the 1260 to 1390 time period, you would have at least 37% of the daughter elements present in the shroud. Again, how did I do that? What happened? I don't know why that happened. Sorry. Okay, back over here. Let's go. Come on. You're going to bore everybody to death if they're not bored already. Present. Boom. Boom. Sorry, folks. Amateur hour. At it again. I'm sure I'm going to be getting emails from the normal trolls. Okay, so when we look at the lignin test, place it to, which makes it consistent with the Dead Sea Scrolls. There's no vanillin in it, and if there's no vanillin in it, it can be all the way. It can be as old as 3,000 years old. So the test itself demonstrates that it is at least 1,300 years old. It can be as old as 3,000. And the corner that was tested was dyed to match the shroud, so it wasn't used in the first century. Then you have another type of testing process that was used, and this is spectroscopy, if I'm saying that right. And here you look at the chemical bonds in the molecules, and what they do here is they look at the infrared. They look at the infrared, or they look at the bonds, see how many bonds have broken, molecular bonds have broken, and they can determine a ratio, and they're able to, of course, date objects using this. And then they have another type of spectroscopy using the same premise, but it uses light scattered versus absorbed. And look at here's the outcome though. Both of these tests give average dates of 33 BC plus or minus to 250 years, either 250 years younger or 250 years older. Then there's the blood evidence that we have on there. The blood type is AB positive for both the shroud and the sardurium of Obiello. We're going to talk more a little bit about that here in a little bit. Only 3%, when we think of AB positive blood types, only 3% of the population has that. And the majority of that exists in Israel today with the Jews. The blood location on the shroud marched perfectly with the Sardarium Obiello in Obiello, Spain. And it dates to around the Obiello. Here it is right here. The Sandarium. Is that? Here we go. So, the Sandarium is, we're going to talk about that here in just a second, but it dates perfectly, matches perfectly with the shroud itself. This was the face cloth. Remember, they found two different cloths laying there in the tomb, and one of them was the face cloth that had been folded up, and the other one was the shroud itself. Here's a killer. There's limestone that is only found in that part of Jerusalem in Israel, and it was found near the feet of Christ, or the image on the shroud. So here you would have somebody going back and sprinkling just trace amounts of this limestone near the feet and the knees of the image on the shroud. Who does that? Who is crazy enough to do that? In addition to that, you have 22 different pollens of plants that are indigenous to both Constantinople and only Israel today that were found on the shroud itself. So what this demonstrates is the chain of custody that, yes, they say that it originated in Jerusalem, in Israel. It went to Edessa. It went to Constantinople because we have spores from and pollens from plants that are only indigenous to that region in Turkey on the shroud. So that confirms all of those other writings that we saw in the historicity of this. It confirms those by saying that the shroud was in Constantinople. And then and Ed brought this up about the coins on the eyes. Now, if they did in fact do this, they have the photograph of an actual coin that existed at that time. And if you look on the shroud, they're able to read the image from that type of specific coin on the shroud itself, which is absolutely amazing. You would have to go through the process of finding a coin that you knew that it would have existed at that time to put on the body of Christ at that time. And then the VP8 analyzer. Now this is what is really crazy. This is crazy stuff here. A VP8 analyzer, they use this when they take care of, or when they take pictures of the moon or distant things that you just cannot get out, go over and look at. For example, the moon. They take pictures of the moon and they try to get a 3D image of what they're taking a picture of. The military has used this to do BDA, which is bomb damage assessment, to see how much damage they've actually done to a certain structure or structures that they're trying to determine if they need to go in and hit them again to completely destroy it, or if they've done their job. Well, they've taken this VP8 analyzer, this thing that they analyze and that analyzes photographs, and used it on the shroud. Folks, the shroud, a piece of cloth, provides a 3D image using this analyzer. How are you going to get a piece of cloth that is thought to have originated in the 14th century to produce a 3D image? How does that happen? What processes do you have to employ in order to get that to happen? This is absolutely absurd to say that this is. Anyway, okay, and then the facial cloth for Christ, the Sandarium Oviedo. This is when you had two separate cloths that were used. You had the linen, the shroud itself that Christ was buried in, and then you had the cloth placed over the face. It's located in Spain, and it was brought to Spain in the 7th century. This is brought to Spain in the this is key to understand. It was brought to Spain. This is a known date that this was brought to Spain in the 7th century. And when you put these things side by side on the shroud, the wound and blood marks match up perfectly, identically. And also, by the way, both of them have limestone dust on them, traces of limestone dust that you only find in Israel. So what type of conclusions can we draw from this? And for me, of course, I have a biased opinion of this because I've read all extensively about this, studied this extensively. But it isn't a biased opinion based on blind faith. It's based on factual evidences that I have seen. So when we look at this, there's scripture support for the shroud existing. The image of the shroud is completely consistent with the passion of Jesus and the burial of Jesus. We don't, and this one right here is the most convincing to me. There's no other processes known now or in the Middle Ages that you could produce an image like this, not on the outermost fibers of threads that are on the shroud itself. You just can't do that. Then there's also, and this is my wheelhouse, there's all kinds of historical evidence that date the shroud clear back to the 1st century. And there's evidence in the art history that I didn't even touch on. It seems like I must have skipped over those slides, where people tried to paint Jesus as he appears on the shroud, how that all changed. And there's also overwhelming scientific evidence using other testing methodologies other than carbon-14 dating. And I did not bring this up, but the carbon-14 dating is only used to confirm the dates of an object, not to establish them. So what the shroud team was doing is they were basically using the processes backwards. They were supposed to use it to confirm the date. And since the date was not confirmed, they said, okay, well, this is the established date, using the opposite methodology in which they use, the C14 is used. And the only one evidence that is against the shroud has been shown to be contaminated by recent carbon. So we could conclude that the shroud of Turin bears the image of our risen Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. The shroud of Turin is that evidence that we have as Christians that Islam does not have. The shroud of Turin is the slam dunk evidence that Jesus rose again from the dead. Because this is in my opinion, this is the God thing. Only God would do something like this. Okay, so well, we lost Dominic. There's Dominic. Dominic came back. Okay. I wanted to drill down on something. Is Ed still here? Ed's here.
Yeah, I'm still here.
Okay. You said that they did not use coins. Jews did not use coins in the first century.
On the eyes is what he was talking about.
Right, on the eyes. And I understand what's the cultural component behind that. It was from Greek culture used this, where they would put coins on the eyes to pay the ferryman at the river Styx when you crossed over into heaven. So I want to see if I can find something confirmed. Do you have anything that confirms that?
Not right off the bat, but you know, the thing that would get me about that even would be that the apostles, why would they say that Jesus Christ would need coins to get into heaven?
Right.
Well,
That
the
makes
ones
no
who
sense.
buried him are, you have to look at who did the burying. You have Joseph of Arimathea, and you had Nicodemus.
Yeah.
And Joseph was a merchant. So it's
But-
not unusual that he would have encountered those practices and may have engaged in that.
Well, you know, and on top of that, Jesus was a Jew. So,
yes.
you know, would they do that for Jews? No. You know, I don't see them doing that for the Jews.
I don't see that as being. I don't think that would have been their purpose. It may have been. I don't. There may have been an alternative reasoning besides that concept.
And do we have textual?
Okay. Well, there's
I've just anything in the Bible about that.
You're right, and there's nothing in the Bible that
No,
where
nothing.
where they've used coins, but in the Bible they're really not very descriptive about the burial processes either.
Yeah, but you know,
describe
if Jesus was doing his planning back 2,000 years ago, just like he did with everything else, I mean, don't you think he would have included the coins too?
I don't think he taught. It's just it's not necessary. Is what I would say. It's
Right.
superfluous. I mean, it's not.
Just a quick look. This is just a quick look. And
it does to me the shroud doesn't matter. I mean, my faith still stands without it. But
right, but I'm saying though is that
point.
there are some. Okay, there's a couple peer-reviewed articles that I've gone through, and they've addressed this, and evidently they have found burials in Jerusalem from this time period with people having coins on their eyes. Now, does that mean that
time period with that kind of those Romans were Greco-Romans? Yeah.
Well, I'm gonna have to spend some time looking at that. And you're right, because if they're Greco-Romans, they're going to practice that too. So they might not even be Jews. They might be somebody else, because the argument evidently says that was here. Okay, here this is Academia Edu. Was the coin on eye custom a Jewish burial practice? It was a prevalent Jewish burial custom of the first century. Let's see. Because they found the article is response to a controversies that have arisen from the discovery of 4 coins inside 2 Jewish tombs of the Second Temple period at Jericho, and the relation to Jewish burial customs of the period.
Yeah, I mean, also, you know, there was a place called Gehenna there. That's where they burned the bodies of a lot of people. You know, so that the fact that he wasn't burned and that he was put in a tomb, you know, just strengthens that even much more.
Yeah, I agree. I brought that up because when we start talking about, you know, what is the likelihood that somebody would suffer all of these same markings of crucifixion that number one was not just body once it was taken down from the cross was just not discarded and thrown away as garbage, but also the crown of thorns, the spear through the heart, and the legs not being broken. So just the mere fact that we have a body here to begin with is a miracle in of itself. And then to compound that with all these other things that we that were there, that's pretty amazing.
I'd have to say our chances are what, 2 million to 1.
Well, I don't.
That's just
I don't
throwing
know.
a
Ask
number out
Dr.
there.
Too Far Phobia. Where is he? Is he still here? About the? He's not here. Oh no, he's
Yeah,
here.
I'm
There he
here.
is.
Yeah, he's
Yeah,
here.
I'm still here. What's
Dr.
up?
Chan. What
Dr.
would be the
Chan.
statistical probability of somebody suffering all of those wounds found on the shroud in correlation to the normal practices of a crucifixion in first century Jerusalem? Go.
Well, I think I'd have a better chance of winning the lotto.
I mean, this
There
guy,
you
he
go.
works with numbers. I mean, he sent me a spreadsheet one day. And I'm like, what kind of life do you have to have if all this, you're sitting there, going through all these numbers? And I'm just like, I look at my checkbook and my eyes start to glaze over. And I started reading that thing. I said, look, I'm never going to be able to follow this. So I appreciate you maintaining, but as long as you know what all these numbers mean, that's what's important. Yeah. So the eye evidence, I'm not sure if that would what's the word I'm looking, refute this being the burial of cloth of Christ or not. Like I said, and that was a great point, Ed. That's I've never heard that before, because I always thought that was a common practice in the burial practices of people at that time. And you're right, it's probably of the Greco-Roman customs and processes as far as the culture is concerned. But as far as the Jewish practice, did some of the customs of the culture creep into Jewish culture itself?
That's a good possibility.
You could make that claim. And I think that's what some of these articles that I'm going to have to read through suggest. Who's talking?
That would be classed, no, it's me, Dominic. Wouldn't it be classed as Hellenistic? Because
Yes.
because it's not Greco-Roman, it'd be classed as Hellenistic from the
Right.
from the Maccabean kind of time period.
True. Yeah. To be more concise with the language. Thank you, Dominic.
Yeah.
You're exactly right. It was the Hellenization of the Jewish people at the time. Let's see. There were other shrouds from other individuals that could. Let me see here. Valenius. Is that how you say Valenius? Alternatively, where are the other shrouds? Oh, that's a great point. Where are the other shrouds from other individuals that this could be dismissible common occurrence? That is an excellent point. Where do we find them? Where are they? Where art thou? The argument from silence begins. And this is, I was reading this week. I hate to admit this. I was in the emergency room yesterday morning. I had fallen Friday evening, horsing around with the grandson, football. Don't even ask. Okay. I fell and I thought
I took you out.
I thought I'd broken a rib. And so I I'm gonna tough it up. And so I went to bed. I slept in the couch because I couldn't move, or not the couch, the recliner. And I couldn't move. And all night you're just like, and I woke up Saturday morning. I thought, you broke something, because I broke a couple ribs a couple years ago skiing. I was skiing with the Olympic skiing team in Colorado, and I just fell down. Anyway, so I go in there and I had 3 bruised ribs. Ooh. So yesterday, and they said he goes, that's a pretty, because he said it's like a deep, I guess there's a bruise and there's like a deep bruise, but I don't know how the heck I did that. But anyway, what was I talking about? Why did that come up?
Well, you're talking about the shrouds. So these
right. Okay, I was reading. Yeah, okay, I was reading while I was in the waiting room to go back to see the doctor, and I was reading this guy's book. Where'd he go? This is John Jackson. This is the guy that runs that center out in Colorado that my wife and I went to when we went out there a couple years ago. He'll bring you in. He brings you in, and he gives you a one-on-one briefing on the shroud itself. And here's his hypothesis. This is kind of interesting. But after reading that passage, as I was doing the presentation, I kind of realized that maybe there's not that there might be a hole in his hypothesis. But his hypothesis is that the shroud itself is the tablecloth that the apostles used during the Last Supper. That's his hypothesis. Well, after, and I was listening to it because he shows different markings on the cloth itself that are not consistent with, and they're not on the body itself. They're in different places on the cloth that he was pointing out to us. And I thought, well, that sounds plausible, because if you're right at the end of right before the Sabbath, know that none of the shops are open because it's going to be the Passover. It's one of the biggest celebrations of all year. Nobody's going to be open. So you needed something to be bury Jesus in. Why not just use that? But it was in the Gospel of Mark that I noticed. Let me go back over here and see if I can find it. And I was reading through that. I said, well, wait a second. If that's true, that does not... it's right here in the Gospel of Mark. Let me bring this back up. Can you guys see this? Can you see this? No, you cannot
In the
see
black
it.
screen right now.
What a loser. Okay, so let me present it. Get it back up here. Present. Share screen. Windows. Bing, ba-boom. Okay, so no. Okay.
Back to black.
Let's try this. Can you guys see that? Can you see that? Okay. My goodness, why is... All right, so where was it? Right here. Gospel of Mark, right here. So when he found out from the centurion, he granted the body to Joseph of Arimathea. Then he bought fine linen, took him down, and wrapped him in the linen. So that right there tells me that maybe that hypothesis of Dr. Jackson is not...
It's unfounded, then, because the scripture speaks against it.
Yeah, I'm gonna email him and ask him about that, because what was neat about this is that he just sits there and talks to you, because it was only me and my wife. He only does like one-on-one appointments. He doesn't have groups come through or anything, because it's a church, number one. But he has a whole section in the back of the churches that's dedicated specifically to shroud research, and he still does this. He was one of the guys that was on a professor at the Air Force Academy. There's a group of professors at the Air Force Academy. He decided to get together and say, hey, let's go check out the shroud. Oh, why not? It has everything to do with the air defenses of our country.
Well, it's part of what gets defended, so why not?
Well, it was, I mean, the guy was just absolutely, I mean, over the top knowledgeable on. Of course, he's going to be knowledgeable on it. I mean, the guy had a PhD in physics, and so he knows how all of these things work. So I'm gonna email him, and I'm not gonna, you got to be, you always want to be semi-professional when you do this. I was looking at, and I remembered already formulating the email in my head, and I'm sure there's probably something there. I'm sure she's probably heard this objection before, and has some type of refutation or rescuing device that accompanies it. Who knows? Okay. Anybody have anything else that they want to talk about?
I like Dom's point. It's amazing that the shroud has survived, as most other shrouds would have disintegrated, and it says a lot. I mean, and we're talking about the concept of historicity, and where are those other things that should be comparable? The argument from silence, as you said, Eric. Yeah. The argument from silence.
Belanius, this is a good point. He was rich. Why wouldn't he have access to linen anyway? Okay, that makes sense. Let's see, valid point, Dominic. But it was cared for, not something. Right, it was.
Yeah. No. I was making the point that that's probably why it survived. Like it was cared for.
Right, and they treated it like it was
Yeah.
the actual burial cloth of Christ. If you have the actual burial cloth of Christ, you were going to do everything you possibly can to preserve it, especially when you look at it and it bears, a piece of cloth has an image of a human being on there. I mean, for crying out, do you think that you're going to just, I want to take a nap with this today and let me just kind of wrap myself up? No, you're not going to. You're definitely going to do everything that you can, especially if you believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God. You're going to preserve all of those relics.
Hey, Eric.
Yeah.
What year, if you might have already touched on that while I wasn't here. Sorry.
You were late.
What year?
I
Yeah,
noted it.
I know.
Right here by your name.
I have to
Cardi.
do my penance.
Yes. Unexcused.
Yeah. What year do you know that they decided to put it under, to where they could see the image on it? Yes, sir.
Right. The photograph was taken, I believe it was like 1898. It was taken in the late 19th century. And when it was published, this is what's caused such great interest in the shroud itself, because it was published and went around the world, and people are, because they before they would take a picture of it and you could see a faint image on it, but he took this as a negative, and if I remember correctly, and when he took this picture, that image and developed it, that image came out. People are just like, whoa, wait a second. How can that, because just looking at it, excuse me,
you can't see it.
What's that?
Yeah, just looking at it with the natural eye, you probably can't. You probably just see the shroud itself, right?
Right. Yeah, you can see an outline. There's something there just looking at it with the naked eye. But when you take a picture like he did, and it jumps out like you, because the photograph.
And you look at the negative, right? That's what you're saying. He looked at the negative and went, "Whoa, there's more to this. Let's investigate this." Yeah, so is that what happened?
It became very popular because this is the image of the shroud itself is a negative image projected onto the shroud.
But that also proves why it's not forgery, because if you didn't know the image was on there, and you're only photographing it with 20th century technology, there's no way that during the medieval times they would have even known about the image that's actually, or they
would understand the concept of negatives.
You guys are gonna be you're gonna be really impressed with this tidbit of information. Are you ready? This is why I'm a history teacher. Do you know when the photograph was developed, or the camera was developed?
When?
1839.
1839.
Yeah, 1839 is when they first developed the camera. That's in my textbook. That's what I teach when we.
Wow, what perfect timing! Nearly.
Yeah, exactly.
Way before,
when you have something that proliferates the world like this did, it's absolutely amazing that we have that technology to do that, and then to think that the technology today exists to where we can date the fibers of this thing, and we're getting dates back that are consistent with what the historical writings of this say. When we got that date, because I remember that date coming out and reading about it, and I was just like, well, wait a second. We have all these people saying for all these years that this was the burial cloth of Christ, and now you're going to have this one dating process refute centuries of historical evidence, and a chain of custody. Yep, and that's what people just cut sling load on it and said, okay, we were no longer. Even the Pope would not use language that would qualify it as the actual burial cloth of Christ after that. It was
Dr. Secretary, just wanted to let you know that it was Muslims who invented the camera, another Islamic invention.
Hey.
Okay.
I have some friends here that would. I live in Rochester, New York, where Kodak is And George Eastman they'd be fighting.
Okay, well, that's because they're Catholic. They don't know their own history. Yes.
I want to make sure I'm right on that date because I'll get an email from people. History of the camera.
Muslims actually invented anything. I was thinking other than say numbers or something like that. I don't know whether
No, Muslims invented everything. Haven't you ever heard 1001 inventions, Islamic inventions? Go look it up. It's on Google. They invented soup. They invented soup. Okay, come on. Nobody invented soup before, but they invented soup. Yes.
They invented Zamzam water or something. They invented.
Yes,
Oh, don't forget the camel urine cure. That's the one I'll give you.
Yes.
They get the camel urine cure and eat the whole flies in the soup cure. That's right. Those are the inventions they get.
No. They invented the parachute. This is no joke. They invented the parachute because some dude tried to fly, and he crashed, but he survived the crash, so therefore they say he invented the parachute. I'm like, dude, no, he crashed. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
I got into some hot water. I don't want to say hot water when people were trying to dox me because I made a comment on a show that they can't even engineer and manufacture lawnmowers in predominantly Muslim countries or Islamic nations. And
that's there's no grass in Islamic countries, so they don't have a.
Well, that wasn't the reason why I said it. We were talking about the average IQs of people that live in Muslim majority countries, and the reason why they have there is this lower IQ, exponential lower IQ. Oh, by the way, I think 81 was the number that I was reading from in that article. It was a peer review article, by the way, and it was because of marrying their first cousins. What's that process called where you marry your first cousin? Or something? What's that?
Incest?
Incest.
No, it wasn't. But there's like some type of ology type term that they use for it when you do that.
Fools have teeny chins.
I am sorry, but yeah, inbreeding causes lower IQ, and this is what the whole premise of it was. So when we start talking about inventions and things of this nature, it just kind of hits a nerve with me because of
that's actually documented that there's studies done on inbreeding and lowering of IQ. So there's actual, there are actual peer-reviewed articles written on that topic.
Yeah, and well, the whole premise behind that for looking
and it's
at
not
that,
just for Arabs. They're talking about the English too and the royals. So please understand that it's a vast. They're specifically looking at royals as well. So
right,
yes.
You're right. A lot of the royalty in Europe did a lot of inbreeding too. But the reason why I was bringing that up is because I can't exactly remember if it was why they were allowing old men to marry younger women. I think it dealt with why you had such a high number of people willing to go out and kill themselves for a belief that is demonstrably wrong when you analyze it. I think that's what I was talking about that day. But of course, no, you can't say that about IQs of Muslims and category. I didn't make a categorization. I was just reading from a peer-reviewed article. But anyway, you know how the deal is. I mean, how things go with this.
Yeah.
People, detractors trying to do what they can to shut you down. Okay. Do we have anything else that we want to talk about today before we call it a day?
Eric, I posted a book on the thing that deals with. I think it deals with the archaeology from the Bible. From Dr. Randall Price wrote a book that deals with archaeology from different sections. So it goes through like the Old Testament stuff and deals with all the different archaeological stuff. It was written in, I think it was 2000 so yeah, the Handbook of Biblical Archaeology by Randall Price. So it deals with the archaeology from the both Old and New Testament and goes through one by one the different finds that have been found kind of through, because we were dealing with the evidence from the Bible. So that's a very fascinating book that deals with that deals with that subject.
This Amazon one that you put, the Shroud of Turin, John.
Oh, that was the Shroud of Turin book, the John Jackson book.
Yeah.
So the Amazon book, I think it was
Yeah, it's $2,500.
I know, but that was the nearest I can find it. I tried to find it cheaper. It wasn't really.
Okay. So look at it. I ain't paying that much for a book.
My book's been up on Amazon for $800. So,
I've seen some of those books. It's just absolutely ridiculous the amount of money that they want from.
Dr. Chan made an appearance here again.
Okay, why has this got a funny thing before the amount of money? Lira?
Pounds. So it's pounds. It's probably I need to do like American.
Well, I don't have any.
We deal in dollars. We don't deal in that English pound stuff. Third-rate currency.
Yeah.
I got something, by the way, breaking news. They shot down another balloon over Lake Huron, Lake Michigan. So,
Really? Today?
Today, yeah.
Yeah.
It wasn't me and my flying contraption.
What is this, like an Olympic sport now? With they're shooting balloons out of the
Another
sky?
reason to waste a multi-million-dollar unit off of how much do missiles cost? I mean, they got to be
$325,000, not to mention the lifetime of the
if we're just talking about the firing rounds, they're still talking tons of cash.
Well, then you got to put one of the most sophisticated aircrafts ever known to man, the F-22 Raptor.
That's what they've been sending at them, yeah.
I mean, come on. I mean, you've ever seen the technology behind them things? Those things are absolutely, they're just, you know how most planes, they turn using the rudder and flaps and stuff. This thing, when it's shooting and Ed probably knows this, when it's shooting its exhaust out, propelling it, it moves the cone, propelling it in different directions. That's how sophisticated this thing. It's scary.
Yeah,
if you're flying a conventional aircraft against this thing, you're going to lose. Big time.
That's why they got to send it against the balloon.
And the whole rear wings move too.
Yeah, they got to send it against the balloon.
It's
now you're talking about the F-22?
Yeah,
that's awesome. That's my favorite bird.
Yeah, F-35 as well as the F-35.
I think that's the newest generation of them.
Yeah.
There's a 35. Yeah, that's the joint. They had different versions, but no, they've been sending the F-22 after these balloons because these Chinese balloons are pretty sneaky.
The F-22 is not for sale to other countries, but the F-35 is. So that's why the F-22.
Really? Yes, we will not sell it to anyone. And we stopped building them because it costs so much money to build them. We won't even sell it to Israel.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Oh, but yeah.
We send this thing after a balloon. I mean, that's kind of the point. It's kind of the irony there is really thick. Here you have a balloon, which is what, like a first century technology. I mean, how long have been people going up in balloons? Do we even know that? Somebody probably
Tell us, historian.
And since the 1700s, but I'm sure it was flown by a training trooper too, because we got to get the equity in there and diversity.
Well, I know they used them during the Civil War as.
No, they've been around since the 1700s. They've been around since the 1700s.
And one other thing that I've learned is that you don't believe everything CNN tells you.
Well, this is Fox News, so there. No, they closed. I know they closed down airspace because there's a warning.
Yeah.
There was an alert put out. They closed down airspace over Lake Michigan. So
yeah, I don't trust any of them.
Joe Biden's on it. He's shooting down the Chinese balloons now.
All right. Well,
they weren't a problem before, but now they are. He's
constantly finding them. Oh my gosh!
I do not
trust. Joe is senile, or the NORAD is just having figments of imagination all over the place.
Yeah.
Balloons
I do not trust our media whatsoever. I do not trust them, any of them at all. Period.
Yeah, to have a rash of these things. I mean, to think, okay, how long has this been going on? How long have they been floating balloons over a country? And the only reason why we're noticing it today, is getting reported today, is because somebody happened to see it, over Montana, and they're like, "Well, what's that up there?" Well,
Exactly.
Like, for crying out loud. Well, what's a balloon that big going up in 60,000 feet above our country? And then they zoom in on it and they see exactly what it is.
Device. That's what it was. The EMP practice device.
I don't know. You get tired of dealing with some of those stories and some of the lies that they tell, and through just outright lying about it, or through obfuscation or not reporting some of the details that they would probably know. Okay, guys, I'm going to call it a night. I'm going to go take some decongestants or whatever that. I think I got some
NyQuil.
No, not NyQuil. What's
It's
the
the
other
fun out of everything.
Seltzer.
Some Chinese tea.
Peace.
Green tea.
Enjoy the Super Bowl.
He's
Yeah.
going for the
You guys gonna watch Super Bowl?
Chemicola, dude. It clear you out, dude.
I forgot about my
Oh,
case
yeah,
that
it's
I
on.
have over that I haven't been able to sell it. That's right.
What's up, Mr. Red?
Going.
Who's watching the game tonight?
Not me. I don't care.
Not
We
me.
got it on.
Are they playing yet, Connie?
Yeah.
7:00.
They went woke. They
Oh, they haven't started yet?
5 o'clock.
Philadelphia.
5
Start
o'clock.
at 7 is
Support
my
the Eagles,
understanding.
support Philadelphia.
No, 5 o'clock.
Yep,
Oh.
15 minutes.
Yeah, 7:00 at my time.
Okay.
15 minutes.
All right. Well, y'all enjoy the game if you're going to watch it. I like
All right.
watching some of the commercials. Some of the commercials are just.
Bye,
Great.
y'all.
Yeah.
Don't forget
They're
the
hilarious.
cold clothes. Don't forget the cold clothes.
Oh, yes.
Oh no! I wanted to play Connie's video.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Where is
Oh,
it?
cool.
Here it is.
I'm gonna make me some more videos.
All right.
Good.
Oh man, the music
Keep on, Connie.
I was getting down.
Yeah, she's responsible for the most Islamophobic intro in all of YouTube.
As I said, disgusting. What kind of hateful people
I
do
know,
this? This is horrible. They're playing bells.
All right, let's close it out with this.
Advanced student and specialist, that the standard narrative has holes. That's what I'm
That's all, folks.